And I genuinely don't know what's more comical. The people who brought you Brexit claiming that the opposition lack a plan, or the bloke who stood in the rain without an umbrella claiming that the other bloke is the one who hasn't got a plan. I mention that because the dust is settling now. Good morning. I hope you're well. And some of the stuff that hadn't quite crystallised yesterday, some of the thoughts that were still a bit embryonic, are now developing. The first is this. This isn't going to be my question, my starter at 10, although we may work towards it. I don't know, what sort of mood are you in? I'm in the mood for 3 hours of just talking politics and seeing where it takes us. We won't be doing that for 6 weeks. I'm not even here next week. But I feel that it is pretty much the only conversation. So we'll definitely catch up at what's going on in the Post Office inquiry, more testimony from Paula Venables, and we will definitely be looking ahead to the International Court of Justice issuing a new ruling on Israel's conduct of its war in Gaza. But that isn't going to happen on my watch. I think that'll happen about an hour into Sheila's show. But apart from that, I think we'll just sort of dance around, will we, together? Waltz around the dance floor together, arm in arm, of British politics. Should we start with an Idiot's Corner? We'll start there. I don't know how the Idiot's Corner is going to play out in the 6-week interregnum, but Colin is in there first this morning. He goes, Keir Starmer stood in front of many local Medway Council Labour councillors, exactly the same as Rishi's parachuted audience. Thing is, Colin, you knew that they were Labour councillors that he was standing in front of. When he gave his speech in the warehouse yesterday, the workforce were wearing high-vis jackets, and so were two Conservative councillors. Why were the Conservative councillors wearing high-vis jackets, trying to blend in with the workforce at the warehouse where the event was being staged? So again, fair play to you for tying yourself in knots already before I'd even started speaking this morning, and fair play to you for keeping the seats warm in Idiot's Corner today. But I looked at the settling dust yesterday, and two things firmed up for me. The first was, I think he hates his own party. I think Sunak hates his own party. And the second was, he really just doesn't want to be there anymore. If he wins, I think he'll look like Boris Johnson and Michael Gove did on the day after getting Brexit over the line. He's thinking, oh my days, I've got to do another 5 years, not just in this job, but in this country. I think at the moment it's highly unlikely that he wins, but you never say never in politics. The lead is not a million miles away that Labour have at the moment from what Theresa May had going into 2017, and we all know that nearly fell apart at the seams. But the two thoughts I've got, which really surprise me because they are quite counterintuitive. They fly in the face of all traditional politics, don't they? That the Prime Minister, the incumbent Prime Minister, doesn't want to win. He has had enough. And part of the reasoning behind calling the election is a deep disdain and disregard for his own MPs. Because I think wherever you turn this morning, the analysis is pretty consensus based, that the people who are crossest about the campaign being called early are his own side. I mean, Starmer was talking about being up for it as long ago as January. He's been calling in the House of Commons for a general election. So I don't think he's wrong-footed them. I think he might have wrong-footed Farage a bit, which denies us the pleasure of seeing him fail to get into Parliament for the 8th time. But hey-ho, but Donald Trump's got boots that need licking. But he seems to have wrong-footed his own members more than anybody else. One of the most prosaic lines I've heard, I think it was from Lewis Goodall, who will be sitting in this chair next week, was that the dislike of Rishi Sunak or the unhappiness with Rishi Sunak would be quite prosaic. It will be these people knowing that they're going to be out of a job in July now, who thought they were going to be out of a job in November. So they had August, September, October, November, best part of 6 months to line up an escape route, to make some calls, to call in some favours, to set up an alternative employment, maybe get a couple of directorships, old boy. For the posh ones, goodness knows what people like Gullis and the rest of them are going to do. I can't imagine that he'd go back to teaching, however desperate the profession may be for new personnel, for more personnel. But they thought they had the best part of 6 months to prepare their passage out of Parliament, and Rishi Sunak has pulled the rug from under them and given them 6 weeks to sort it out. I suspect there'll be more announcements of people who won't be standing again. So those two thoughts I find really hard to get past. Number one, he doesn't want to win, Rishi Sunak. And number two, I think he's deliberately flicked the V's at his own party. I honestly think, I could be wrong about the second one, but I don't think I'm wrong about the first one. So what we're going to talk about today? Well, I would like to take you back to the time that Rishi Sunak stood behind a lectern outside Downing Street and didn't end up looking like a drowned rat. I'd like to take you back to his accession to the highest office in the land, a position, of course, to which he has never been elected, either by the membership of the Conservative Party or the electorate of the United Kingdom. The only position to which he's ever been elected is the MP for Richmond, which I suspect he's probably hoping he'll lose that as well, although the statistics suggest that he won't. And partly because Liz Truss had been so catastrophically awful, and partly because I think that he had emerged from COVID with a fairly good reputation. For the record, and in his defence, I think one of the main reasons why Liz Truss beat him to the leadership of the party, as voted for exclusively by the Conservative Party membership, I think that had a lot to do with the colour of Rishi Sunak's skin. It's easy to say in hindsight because Liz Truss was, in retrospect, so obviously catastrophic, but most of us, I think, had a fairly clear idea of just how obviously catastrophic she would prove to be before she proved to be obviously catastrophic. So why would you favour her over the man that had brought you furlough and had apparently helped to steer or helped to keep Boris Johnson somewhere close to the straight and narrow of the of his premiership. So he was like seen as the safe pair of hands on Downing Street, while Boris Johnson next door was seen as the fumbling hands. So when he became Prime Minister, he stood in front of Downing Street with quite a lot on his side. He wasn't Boris Johnson and he wasn't Liz Truss. And that was enough, even for sort of sworn enemies of Brexit and the Conservative Party in its current iteration. That was enough to earn, at least briefly, the benefit of the doubt. I am tempted to ban the words Suella Braverman from answers to this question, just because I think it's too obvious. You say, where did it all go wrong? I say, well, 2.5 hours after claiming that he was in favour of integrity, professionalism and accountability, he put the human embodiment of the polar opposite of all of those three things back in the Home Office. I don't know what the polar opposite of integrity, professionalism and accountability actually is in words, but I know what it looks like. It looks like Suella Braverman. And he put her straight back in the Home Office, at which point any claims to integrity, professionalism and accountability disappeared out the back door. So that's too easy. I want a slightly broader sweep of Sunakism, of Sunak's premiership. And the question I'm going to ask you is, where did it all go wrong? Or I love it when I like it's a great freedom I have here to finesse the question live on the radio. How did it all go so wrong for him? At this point, as I say, anything can happen in 6 weeks. But right now, his own party hate him. The country are laughing at him. His own advisors are arguing over whether or not he should have called the election in the first place. And he appears to wish that he was absolutely anywhere but wherever it is that he is today. The gaffes, that's terrible for a politician. That's like a lingering smell that you can't get rid of. That's like when someone sews prawns into your curtain rail when you're trying to sell your house and you don't know where the smell is coming. Once the aroma of gaffe-prone politics takes hold of a politician, it's almost impossible to get rid of. Turning up in Wales to talk about the Euros without knowing that Wales, someone should have said that to him. If you're going to do that thing, and I don't think Sunak pretends to be into football in order to posture. I think he is a genuine fan of Southampton Football Club. He's not anything like as sincere or authentic a football fan as Keir Starmer is, but I don't want to. There's going to be plenty of mockery of Rishi Sunak on this programme today and for the coming 6 weeks. So that's not an area where I'd mock him. So perfectly reasonable that someone who was at Southampton last week might mention the football when he's out meeting actual people. And we know from watching him for a couple of years that he's not actually very good at meeting real people. He always looks very odd. He always looks a little bit like a sort of character in a in is it simulacrum, or he looks like a character in some sort of holodeck. Hello, normal people. It's like something out of Red Dwarf. He's like Chris Barry in Red. That's who it is. He's a bit like Rimmer in Red Dwarf. Hello, normal people. But he's actually, I'm just shake head, shake hands, roll sleeves. He doesn't seem very normal. He's quite robotic. But his aides should have known he's likely to bring up the football. So don't mention, be like John Cleese, wouldn't it, in Fawlty Towers? Don't mention the football because the Welsh aren't in it. First thing he did, sat down in a brewery, which you couldn't make up as well. Here is a man who doesn't have an umbrella in the rain and can't organise a knees up in a brewery. He turns up at a brewery in Wales, talks about the football, at which point someone has to say to him, "We're not in it, champ. We're not in it." So that's part of the problem for him, his personal inadequacies. But they weren't obvious when he was Chancellor, which means that this may be a chicken and egg case. Would the real Rishi Sunak please stand up? Please stand up. And he was always useless. He was always weird. He was always petulant. He was always gaffe-prone. Or has something happened over the course of the last few months that has rendered him petulant, rendered him ridiculous, rendered him awful, rendered him gaffe-prone? I don't know. So I'll ask you both questions. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to tell me one or both of these things. Where did it all go wrong for Rishi Sunak?